welcome everyone to our webinar. We are recording our session this evening. Everybody, please mute yourself to keep distractions to the panelists to a minimum. And I think that's all the introductions I have. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator this evening, Jackie Pressinger.
Well, thank you so much, Greg, and welcome to everyone to the discussion this evening as we celebrate and highlight these inspiring women of purpose who are fostering the future. We certainly thank you all for taking the time to join us as we look at the many ways in which these women are making a difference in their communities and learn more about their inspirational stories. In 2021, La Dames d'Escoffier International, in partnership with Yeti, introduced the LDEI Woman of Purpose Award, recognizes an exceptional dame who has set herself apart by making a positive impact in a local or global community, incorporating in the important and complex realms of global sustainability, food justice, and public health. A visionary woman who has made strides towards improving our food system. This exceptional field of nominees wanted to go above and beyond, and these impactful dames are willing to take the time to inspire others who are like-minded. The Leadership and Mentorship Group is our invitation to all who are interested to learn from and connect with these inspirational women. I'm Jackie Pressinger. I am a proud dame from Florida, so quick shout out to our amazing South Florida chapter president, Irene Moore. I have to tell you, I'm really honored to be asked to be here today with such a inspiring and talented panel for this discussion. Based on community-minded women who are truly making a difference. So we do want to answer your questions for those of you who are joining us today. So please use the raise hand function if you have questions for today's panelists. So without further ado, let's meet our special guests. And when I call on you, please let me know a little bit more about yourself. Let's start off with Shanita McAfee Bryan. Would you like to kick us off and let us know a little bit more about you and your background?
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy to be here. So I am Chef Shanita. I'm in the Kansas City, Missouri chapter of La Dames. Shout out to our president, Jenny Vergara. I think I saw her side on. Hi, Jenny. I run a food-based workforce development program in Kansas City called the Prospect KC. We focus on food access, nutritional literacy, and career resilience. So during the pandemic, because of the digital divide in our area, we spent most of our time focusing on the food access and the nutritional literacy. Our space is under construction, and we're very much looking forward to getting into the work part of our development.
Well, thank you so much. We'll hear a little bit more about your project in just a moment, but thank you for being here. And Mary Schwartz, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I apologize. I've just got a 4-month-old here who's slightly cranky today, so hopefully she keeps quiet. Yeah, so I founded an organization called Growing Chefs that sends chef volunteers into schools where they plant gardens and cook with kids. That's it in a nutshell, and I'll tell you more about it later.
Fabulous, wonderful. We can't wait. And hello to your little sweet one there. Anne Harvey Yonkers, would you mind introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about your background?
You're on mute.
I am the founder and executive director of Fresh Farm Market, which is a farmers market system in Washington, D.C. that is in the metro area. So we have markets in 3 states. We have Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, not a state, but what I am interested in talking about is how Fresh Farm, partially by the design that I wanted it to have, is entrepreneurial and has been able to launch a whole series of other entrepreneurial and philanthropic activities that enhance the market and the sales of the market.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, our final panelist is Aubrey Alvarez. Can you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My name is Aubrey Alvarez, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of EAT Greater Des Moines and a proud member of the Greater Des Moines, Iowa LDEMS chapter. EAT Greater Des Moines just celebrated our 9th birthday in April. So it's exciting to still be here. And really the focus of our work is we work more at the system level of trying to make changes where possible so that everyone has access to food that allows them to thrive. So we do a lot of work in the food recovery space and also trying to grow and support more local farmers and local producers to be able to have thriving, successful businesses.
Amazing. What an amazing panel of just inspiring and successful women. I know that we'd all love to hear a little bit more about what prompted you to start your mission in your community and more about your organizations. So please take the time that you need. I know that food recovery and our food system are certainly a hot topic, especially these days. So Aubrey, I'm wondering if you might be able to kick us off and let us know a little bit even more information about EAT Greater Des Moines, please.
I'd be happy to. And it's interesting that the conversation is today, because actually previously, prior to working, taking my position, the position I applied for was a local food coordinator. So that's why I call myself an accidental executive director, because I had no intention of starting a nonprofit and actively worked to not start a nonprofit, but enjoyed the work that I was doing. So here we are. But EAT Greater Des Moines started initially because there was a lot of work happening within the food space and conversations within groups, but there was no central entity that kind of helped bring people together and keep conversations moving forward. And one of those real opportunities was food recovery. So food rescue and food recovery really is just the opportunity to take food that is still edible but not sellable and getting it to a location that could use it. So I think, you know, there's a lot of I was not familiar with food rescue when I first started. I remember the last event I had at United Way was a big catered event, and I asked at the event, you know, what's happening with all these extra meals afterwards? And the response was, oh, you know, we can't donate those, health law. I was like, that's a bummer. But then within my first week on the job, I learned about the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act that was passed in the late 90s that protects donors from any civil or criminal liabilities. So it was then that I realized I had kind of this, but wait, like, so how do we have such a challenge and such a food insecurity issue while at the same time we're throwing away 30 to 40% of everything that's produced? It just did not make sense, does not make sense. So a lot of our work, because EAT Greater Des Moines doesn't serve any people directly. So we are really just here to try to find those resources and then get them to the groups and organizations that can use them. So of the 225 organizations and groups that we serve, only 80% are able to access and order through our Feeding America food bank. So it's not because these groups aren't doing incredible work and really supporting their community. It's just because they don't fit the traditional model of a food pantry. So, you know, food recovery has really allowed a lot more organizations and groups to have good food to be able to provide to whoever they're serving. So, you know, that's really been a huge opportunity here. You know, I think today it's actually interesting. I was sobbing earlier because I had one of those days where I stopped at our event center, Iowa Event Center, and was able to pick up meals because they donate 3 times a week, every week. And then I went to one of our funders' annual events where they had 800 people talking about like how proud they are to do the work in the community and how much they care about helping people. And then they fought me to throw away 100 meals. And it was just infuriating to have at the same time so many people here saying, oh, we wish we could do more. And I'm like, you could legit right now, just don't fight me to take this food out. But, you know, again, I think that's been part of why I stay in the work, because it's those conversations and continuing to push on these kinds of things that is the only way that we're going to be able to keep kind of getting things better. So that's kind of why I stay here, not to say that it was just lucky that I had a 2:30 appointment with my therapist, so I cry, get it all out. But otherwise, it's really just seeing that opportunity every day. You know, in our community, only a quarter of the grocery stores and convenience stores participate in food recovery. So there's so much opportunity to just get that food to places and people that need it, that it's exciting to try to keep moving that forward. Also frustrating a lot of the time, but when it works out, it's exciting.
Sounds amazing. And was your organization impacted through the pandemic? I know there was a lot more food insecurity with people out of work. Did you see that in your area as well?
We were, and what makes us unique is that, like I mentioned, we don't serve any individuals directly. However, we have a paid transportation program that we started in April of 2018, because in food recovery, so one of the main barriers is just getting food donors to let the food go. The second challenge is getting the food from where it is to where it needs to go. So that's why we launched in 2018 a partnership with actually the organization that does Meals on Wheels, where we pay them to pick up food from these convenience stores 3 days a week. And then they deliver the food we had around 45 different locations, schools, daycares, pantries, places that were getting that food. When the pandemic hit, all those places still needed food. Well, all of the convenience stores still had food, but we went from 40 locations to 10 very quickly because a lot of places shut down. You know, they weren't able to serve clients anymore. So, you know, we saw a dramatic increase in the need for food, but we also had to find different ways to get it. So that's actually where we went. Prior to the pandemic, we had around 100 different partners that we were working with, but because of the pandemic, we also were working with some of our wholesale distributors, because they were one, you know, while there were no events and, you know, schools and restaurants were shut down, there was still food. It was just at the wholesale level. So we ended up being a conduit they were selling things like case of apples for $4. So we were just making that easy for groups to access. So that's how we went from 100 partners to 225 partners, because we ended up onboarding a lot of daycares and childcare facilities, and really anywhere that was serving people, we wanted them to have the food. So that's really how we kind of ended up then being part of the USDA Farmers to Families Food Box program, where we were moving at the end of that program 2,300 boxes a week to over 60 different organizations around the area. And they were getting boxes of fresh produce, milk, protein, and it was incredible. But I should say too, Eager, when we're a small staff of 3, so we don't have a warehouse, we don't have forklifts, any of that stuff. But the only way it was able to be done was through partnership. So, you know, we really were able to find a lot of new partners through the pandemic, and they're still here and we're still trying to get them food. But now a lot of things are shifting back to how we've always done it. And so a lot of these groups that have been left out are continuing to be left out. So that's a big part of my work as well, is just trying to open up access so more of these groups that are doing the good work of serving people can have access to all the food that's available, but to a smaller market.
Incredible work. Oh my gosh. And with only 3 of you, it's amazing. Now, from identifying the need in your area to actually launching the project, what sort of time frame did that look like for you?
I started, like I mentioned, I took a job as a local food coordinator in April of 2013. And I didn't know what that meant. And luckily, neither did the people who were hiring me. They're like, we need this local food coordinator. We're not exactly sure what it's going to do, but a lot of it is just talking with people throughout our community who are involved in food system work and asking them what's going really well, what would you like to see more of, and where are their gaps. So my hope was that I was always just going to get to be nested within another nonprofit, and that we could do the work, but I didn't have to worry about like a board and how do you get paid and, you know, all the administrative stuff that goes into it. Unfortunately, that's not how our home had seen it. They were planning on us only being there for 2 years. So while I tried to find another location or a nonprofit that would let us just, I was like, oh, bring my own money. It's okay. You don't have to pay me. I'll pay myself. But we ended up needing to start a separate entity. So I went through the process of starting Eat Greater Des Moines and filing for it to become a separate nonprofit entity. And we became recognized by the IRS in 2016. So from there, it's just been kind of, a lot of this is learning on the job. I'm the first one to tell someone, here's what I do know, here's what I don't know, but I'm fine knowing about 70% and still moving forward. So, and that's usually what's good, you know, being on my board, you got to be ready for anything because you never know what we're getting into.
Well, thank you for all that you do. We're going to come back to you when we get into our group discussion, but just incredible work, and thank you for that. So next up, we're going to go to Mary Schwartz. We'd love to know a little bit more about the work that you're doing with Growing Chefs and Lunch Lab, and how you're reaching and feeding and inspiring young people and family and caregivers in your area.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, I'm part of the Vancouver, British Columbia chapter of Les Dames, so out in Canada. Yeah, so Growing Chefs is going on 17, almost 18 years now. I started it when I'm a professional pastry chef myself, and I started it when I was a young pastry chef, just, you know, really inspired being in these amazing professional kitchens and seeing this like depth of knowledge and interest and passion that chefs have about sustainable food systems and local agriculture, and not having any way to share that knowledge with the greater public. So like many people, you know, like Abby was saying, it started as just like a, you know, a fun project I did with a couple chef friends where we went into an elementary school classroom and taught the kids how to grow some food and taught them how to cook with it. And it was just a bit of a fun experiment. And the next thing I knew, you know, more chefs heard about it and they wanted to volunteer, and more teachers heard about it and they wanted it in their classrooms. And the next thing I knew, I was running this full-fledged nonprofit organization. But I have continued to work, you know, full-time in the industry as a pastry chef myself, and eventually hired a much larger team to run the organization because, you know, cooking is my first passion as well. So the program works where we pair a group of chef volunteers with a school classroom, and they visit that classroom over the course of a few months to help the kids grow these very small, very modest, but fast growing vegetable gardens, you know, beans and peas and some lettuces and things. And then towards the end of the program, teaching the kids how to prepare some simple meals with what they've grown. So just that basic experience of how amazing it feels to plant something and nurture it and then eat it. I personally believe there's nothing more empowering than that. And at this stage of operations, well, pre-COVID, I should say, we were operating with about 275 chef volunteers. We were in, you know, upwards of 70 classrooms in our local area. And it feels like the sky's the limit. The need and the interest in this kind of program and opportunity just continues to grow and grow and grow.
So inspiring. And, you know, I was reading in your bio as well that, you know, just sort of in the summer of last year, you provided over 70,000 meals to, you know, in your area. So for someone who might be thinking about launching their own community endeavor, similarly in their area, what advice might you have for someone?
Well, as I mentioned, I was not a, you know, nonprofit expert when I first started. Now, you know, 17 years later, I've got a few years under my belt and I have a lot better understanding of what it takes. I think it's hard to say because if I could go back in time, of course, I'd love that breadth of knowledge and experience and insight into the nonprofit system that I didn't have at the time. But I think what makes a lot of people who do start charities or run charities successful is pure passion and drive. And so, you know, is it more important to have the knowledge or is it more important to have the passion and commitment? And I don't think Growing Chefs would have been as successful as it has been without that kind of pure, raw enthusiasm that you almost can't have if you know too much. But in retrospect, I think drawing people around me who did have more experience and knowledge in the nonprofit sector really helped at first until I kind of got on my feet in that way. And so, you know, collaborating, which is the most beautiful part in many ways of doing charitable work, collaborating with people who complement your skills and bringing the passion that you have to the project, I think is a good place to start.
Absolutely fabulous. And fellow Canadian pastry chef myself, so I feel like we're kindred spirits
Yeah.
already. I hope to meet you in person. Now, being a mother of such a young one as well right now, how do you maintain a work-life balance with all these big projects you have going on?
Well, I mean, I'm on maternity leave for now, which is great, but I have stayed quite involved in Growing Chefs. We've got some transitions happening and some staffing that's shifting and things like that. And I have to be honest, you know, even with the little baby, it's really nice for me to have a place to go, you know, every day or every couple days to meet with others. And when I say that, we're doing most things over Zoom right now, which makes it very, very easy. But, you know, to keep my head in the game, I love being a mom to this little babe, but it's really nice to have something else that I can continue to engage in. It feels very easy. I don't know how I'd feel if I didn't have it, to be honest.
Well, fabulous. Well, we're going to come back to you as well, both of you. Right now, let's hear from Ann Harvey Yonkers. We know that health is directly connected to what we eat. There's unfortunately a lot of food deserts in the US, and I'm sure in Canada as well, where there's limited accessibility to food. So Anne, could you let us know a little bit more about Fresh Farm Market?
Yeah, I would thought tonight I would sort of do then and now, because our organization we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. And so it's a very big moment in the history of Fresh Farm Market. And we opened our first market in 1997. And it was at a time on the East Coast where really farmers markets were not really understood or known very much, at least in the Washington, D.C. area. And when we went to the city of Washington and asked for a permit to close a street to have this market, they said, well, what are you, a barbecue or a festival, or what does that mean? What does it mean, a farmer's market? And so we had to be pretty fierce, and we had to be great advocates in terms of actually trying to explain, and then also creating a market which was not conventional in the sense of what had existed. In DC and in Maryland and Virginia, there were only 2 producer-only markets. So the most important thing about our market is that it's producer-only. So only if you grow it or make it do you sell in our markets. And then I myself did a long feasibility study from 94 to 96, in which I talked about establishing a farmer's market in Washington, D.C. Was it possible? Where could it be? What were the barriers? I mean, who would be served? And I enlisted Green Market in New York, the current head of it, the previous head of it, to help me sort of solve those problems. But for myself, I also really wanted to create a model market which was entrepreneurial and that had the possibility of generating other kinds of connections in the community that would serve multiple generations, multiple kinds of people. And so I had this amazing opportunity, which most people have not had when you start a farmer's market, to go and look at all the literature, to go to the rules of the major farmers markets which existed at that time, like in Seattle, the Seattle farmers market and the Ferry market and the Santa Monica market and the New York market, and look at them and see how they were structured. And what I wanted, everybody thinks, loves markets, but most of the time, unfortunately, they're not really professionally run. And a lot of times we don't know what happens as a result of the farmer sales, because they're stall fees, so that you go to a table and you just pay a standard fee to stand there and sell. So one of the things that I did was look at what I thought were the best practices. One of the important things that I selected was something called percentage fees. So when you come to market and you sell, we charge you as a market 6% of what your sales are. That does two things. You report your sales so we know how the market is doing. And it also makes you a partner in the market itself, because as you do better, you pay more. And as you pay more, you get more invested in the health of the market itself. So that's worked really well for us, opening and closing with a bell, which is fun, as well as sort of regulating. We started with a chef at market program because we knew the chefs were our best friends. We had a gleaning program, which we've talked about earlier today, which is sort of the standard way for taking this beautiful fresh produce and bringing it to some kind of a institution where we had a gleaner. DC Central Kitchen was our gleaner. And so we had some really good things in place, but we also had this idea that if we were going to really be important factor in changing the way Washingtonians ate, we needed to be part of the civic life. And for me, that meant that we needed to be on public space. And so that was a real commitment on our part. And it almost resulted us in our not being able to launch our original market in '97 because we had to get the permit from the mayor of the District of Columbia. And so they didn't know who we were, and we couldn't get any meetings, and nobody would answer our calls. And we had established this June 6th as our opening date, and we didn't have the permits. And so we had also by this time involved not only the mayor, but we had the diplomatic corps, because on the street that I wanted to close for this market lived the Colombian ambassador. And the Colombian ambassador thought that our market would be dangerous to him. And so he made a big fuss with the diplomatic corps. And then most sort of strangely and wildly, that meant that the Secret Service got involved in opening our market. So I always say that we have the most dramatic story of opening our first market of any market, I know we do, in the whole country. And the story ends that the night before we opened, we got a fax in our office that said, you have a permit. And so, but meanwhile, we had invited the deputy mayor in case to protect against getting arrested without having a permit. So we were strategic. And so that was then, that was the first season. The first season, we had 15 farmers. We had 4 products, fruits, vegetables, plants, and flowers. And we had sales of $265,000. And now in the market system, we have 213 farmers. We had total sales of $20 million. The sales at DuPont Circle, which were 265, are never now $7 million. We have a school program which involves 7,000 kids and 19, and it's a cooking, and it's related, and I think it would be very collaboratively interesting for all of us, related, because it's cooking and gardening. And then we have this amazing new program called Pop-Up Food Hub, which basically uses a market location to increase by 2 or 3 times the amount of sales that farmers get by agreeing to sell wholesale. So there's a lot of really interesting and innovative ideas.
Absolutely incredible. And I know that you mentioned Secret Service. So I know that some of your work is near the White House. And I know that it was also mentioned that you also worked with Michelle Obama on some projects as well.
That was the most exciting day. We opened by the White House market. I got a call from Sam Cass, who was working on nutrition. And local food with Michelle Obama. And of course, she was famous for her garden, but she really wanted a farmer's market. So it's a block from the White House. And it was the most exciting and wonderful day. And to have her, she walked right up to me when she arrived and gave me a hug. And she says, "You're doing great work." So that was great for Fresh Farm, but it was great for markets every place. I mean, it elevated everybody.
Amazing story. Now, I know that you also mentioned the feasibility study, and for those women who are tuning in who may not have ever approached a project like that, could you share a little bit about some of the factors that you looked at in that study?
Yeah, I was basically looking at the where and if we could locate a market, and that meant that I was looking at factors like, how much street traffic, where were the locations, was there parking, was there metro, those kind of things, and also where you have enough people, you had enough density that the market could really thrive. So you can't really use a market as a way to really renew an area. You have to go to an area that has enough vitality itself, and then you put the market there, and then boom, it just takes off.
Well, thank you for all of that great
Welcome.
information. And I know that we'll come back as well when we get into some of the group questions. But now I'd like to move on to another very inspiring woman who I actually had the pleasure of meeting in person a couple of weeks ago, Shanita McAfee Bryant. Okay, so you went from restaurant owner and chef into workforce development. And we know that staffing in the food service industry is a major issue right now. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your work at The Prospect and Urban Eatery.
Sure. So we actually launched our nonprofit right before the pandemic. So I kind of came up with this idea to honor my dad, who had unexpectedly passed away in 2018. He was my business partner. And so we launched on his 60th birthday, January 13, 2020. And we had all these wonderful plans and all this great stuff we were going to do in 2020. And then March 12th, the bottom fell out of our city, and I spent the whole year in like pivot turmoil. So that's how we got into the nutritional literacy and food access space. And that's kind of how we redefined the nonprofit, was out of need from the pandemic. I also did the farm to family boxes, like I think it was Ann mentioned. And what I learned being out on the street every single time we did a distribution is that people did not know how to cook, right? So the solution was not to drop 25 pounds of fresh produce in neighborhoods where people have been surviving on processed food for almost 3 generations, and expect them to be like, "Oh, thank you so much. I have more potatoes than my recipe repertoire will allow me to ever use." So that's when we started producing recipes and videos to start getting people to understand their relationship with food. The workforce development part is really just now starting to kick off, because we're in Kansas City, we're located in the 3rd district, so there's a huge digital divide. My nonprofit is a part of the Catalyst Kitchen Network. So while the other members, more seasoned members, were able to switch to a digital platform, and they had a way to get the supplies to people and get them online to do their lessons and do all that, we didn't have that bandwidth. So we focused on youth programs and getting into like smaller groups, and now moving into the full out workforce development, and basically adding a little bit of what I can't remember. Anne also is doing, adding a small grocery store to the concept. So it's not just a coffee shop that trains people. Now there's also a grocery store in an area that is experiencing more food apartheid than any other area in our city. Now there's going to be a grocery store there where people will be able to access locally sourced foods and farmers on a daily basis. Because if you guys look at the current structure of farmers markets, well, particularly here, the hours really only allow them to, meet a certain clientele, right? And when you're living in a food desert, and the only farmers market is on Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 2, that doesn't really allow you an opportunity to engage with the farmers and get fresh produce.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. And I know that, so you'll be starting up your 16-week culinary program, if it is not already. And I know that, again, there are probably some people tuning in today who may own restaurants or have friends that do, that are looking for staff. What type of skills are you imparting into the students who will be going through your program? And also, can you tell us a little bit about where your students are coming from and how they're finding you?
Sure. So we did it last summer with youth. We're going to do it again with our youth this summer. We have 2 cohorts starting at 2 different local service partners. So those are run with partnership. And I was able to find nonprofits who wanted to partner on that and say, oh yeah, you can come here and teach the culinary for the youth here. And then it works as a referral source for other nonprofits around the city. So last summer we, with one of our large philanthropists here in Kansas City, Mary Block, came to me with an idea of a program to help restaurants and food providers. We called it Feed KC Forward. So essentially, she is a fundraising maven, and I don't know how she does it, but anyway, she raised almost $350,000, and we were able to partner with restaurants and partner them with a service agency. We paid for the food, the restaurant provided it. Another nonprofit that does a food rescue gave them all the produce and whatever they needed, and then the meals went out. So that's we created those relationships with restaurants, obviously, who were agreeing to be work partners because we helped them during the pandemic, and then service agencies that are agreeing to be referral partners because we helped them in the pandemic.
Love it. Awesome. So fabulous. Okay, so we're also going to take questions from all of you who are tuning in. If you're not aware how to do this, we're going to do raise your hand. So at the bottom of your screen where it says reactions, if you click on that, and I'm going to try and do double duty and go back and forth with screens here, but under reactions, it'll say raise hand. So while we're giving you a moment to figure that piece out, let's go around then, and let's just, everyone is seeing, all of the great things about your organization, but we know there's been a lot of challenges too. So why don't, if anyone would like to share, maybe I'll start it off with Aubrey. What's been the biggest challenge that you have had to overcome, I guess, since starting your project?
Oof, there's a lot. I would say, one of my biggest challenges is, we have a lot of amazing funders in our community that like to talk about wanting to do, good work and do some of this different work and system change. But I think when it gets right down to it, that's not always fun or easy, or it makes some people upset. So, I think that can sometimes be incredibly frustrating and hard, because fundraising isn't fun as it is. Like grant writing, raising the money to do the work isn't fun. I know I've had plenty of people be like, well, just write a grant for it. Like, just because you write it doesn't mean it gets funded. I write a lot of grants and a very small portion are funded. So I think, that it gets very frustrating to have, today was one of those situations where I needed to pick, do I make a funder mad or do I stand in my integrity? And I picked my integrity, but I did get a reprimand call from that funder, about, these are some of those things. It was just appalling to me that you can have a whole 800-room ceremony talking about how you care about food insecurity and then throw away 100 meals. Like, that kind of stuff makes my head want to blow up. So instead, I just pushed back, cried, and will come back to fight another day tomorrow. But that kind of stuff, especially since it's been 9 years, I am just losing my patience in trying to have some of these same conversations again and again and acting like things are different. I think that makes it's challenging when, especially since you rely on, these are the people who to fund the work that we're doing. So that's hard.
Absolutely. Would any of the other panelists like to chime in and share? I think it's important to celebrate the success, but also to share the challenges as well, so that maybe some of the other women might be able to avoid that in their nonprofits as well. Any of the other panelists?
Supply chain issues have been a major setback. Our building was supposed to open in December of last year. We might open by September of this year. So supply chain on that construction side, and then just even when we're producing the meals that were getting packaged, finding consistent containers, you know, sometimes they were round, sometimes they were square, sometimes they were aluminum, sometimes they were plastic. It just kind of depended on what we were able to get our hands on. And that's frustrating.
I would
Excellent.
say, you know, for a longer term, the 25-year-old organization succession is a very big issue. And we had a co-directorship. Bernadine Prince and I were the co-directors for 18 years. And then we had we hired someone who was actually on our board and was serving as he was serving on the board and actually doing the financials and was a treasurer. And he just turned out to be not at all good at his job. In fact, you know, negligent. And this was somebody that we had worked with. And then followed by a young woman who was, you know, very positive, but she didn't have the deep sort of understanding and the complexity of running a bigger organization, because the organization kept growing and growing and growing. So I would say succession is, and finding talent. We currently have Hugo McGolan as our director, and he's fantastic. And he's been there 2.5 years, and we're so lucky. And he has been an innovator as well as an administrator.
Great. Thank you very much. Very, very important feedback. And let's then, we'll go to Mary. You know, I know that sometimes your work may touch lives and families in ways that you may not have anticipated or expected. What do you think your constituents or beneficiaries would say is the best thing about your organization?
Well, I think it really depends who you ask. And there are a lot of ripples that we never anticipated that have been really rewarding. I mean, of course, the obvious straightforward kind of story that we sell, for example, to funders is, you know, kids are growing and eating healthy food and teaching their families what they learn at school. Really, really important stuff. But then, and so we, of course, we get the, you know, the letters from parents saying, oh my gosh, my child wouldn't eat a salad and now they are asking for second servings of arugula. You know, those are really great to hear. But I think some of the more subtle impacts have been things like the strengthening of the chef community. I mean, for me, a huge part of this project was always wanting to give chefs an opportunity to share what they know and realize how special and important the work that they do is. I mean, for many of us here, we're very familiar. Being a chef is a very weird experience. You know, you work crazy hours, you're kind of the opposite of society. You work everybody else's holidays. You know, you rarely have an opportunity to engage with the greater community and really contribute something meaningful. And the relationships that chefs have formed as volunteers through the program and the camaraderie that's come out of that has been so rewarding. And in addition, something that I wasn't expecting that has been so magical is that the program really gives kids of all types with all different skill sets the opportunity to thrive. You know, some kids don't do well in a traditional school setting, but they might really, really love working with their hands, and they might really love seeing the results, you know, the physical, tangible results of their efforts. Or kids who might have neurodiversities, who don't know how or don't engage easily in other ways, who come alive when their hands get in the dirt or they're, you know, stirring a pot of soup. So those kinds of things have been just so incredibly special.
Oh, I love that. Any of the other panelists like to share their thoughts as well about this topic, or should we move on? All right. So we will go on to the next question then. And I'll start with, let me see, I'll start with Anne then. I know we've talked a lot about funding organizations, and Aubrey was mentioning grants. We know that, obviously there needs to be money in order to make these great things happen. So where might someone start, or if someone has a small but growing operation, where can they best identify some of these opportunities for grants in their area?
Well, I think it's a very unusual climate right now, because the federal government has made so much money available for philanthropic reasons. And so there's a lot of money swishing around in the states, which is available if you know how to, if you feel competent. I mean, writing a federal grant is one of the more difficult ones. But for example, Fresh Farm Market has just gotten 2 federal grants. One was a state grant from the District of Columbia to run the Produce Plus, which is the program where anyone with food coupons like SNAP or WIC or so forth can get free produce. And that is, they wrote $1 million check to Fresh Farm Market, and we are actually administering the program. So that was, and they awarded it to us because they liked the way that the operations were going. The other one is a big USDA grant, which is also 1.4 million. But those are complicated. I mean, usually it's easier to find a funder who's smaller and to get a smaller grant, but that's also frustrating. I mean, a lot of grant agencies give you a grant for $10,000, and it's a lot of work, and it doesn't actually pay the salary of the person that actually has to do the work.
Thank you very much. Yes. Would anyone else like to share about any grants or funding, or where they're finding any?
We have
money?
like a local, it's similar to like a chamber of commerce for nonprofits. So find out if you have something like that in your city, and then they send out like a monthly calendar of all of the foundations and different funders in our area that would be providing funding. So that's a really good way to get started before you tackle some of those larger USDA grants.
Perfect. Great advice. Thank you very much. And Aubrey, we're going to come back to you. I know that, as much as you want to, with a small but mighty workforce, you can't be everything to everyone. And of course, it's been a hard time for everyone over the past couple of years. Have there been any hard decisions that your organizations had to make recently, or how do you evaluate trade-offs when it comes to the services that you're able to offer?
That's really been, I think, probably one of the hardest parts of this work is, so for example, the transportation program that we started in April of 2018 was a pilot. I raised $10,000 because I feel like it's important, the work that we're asking these folks to do to pick up food and deliver it somewhere is work. That's a job. I think we should compensate people for that. So we raised the money to do it. And then my hope was that after a while of, for the businesses to see the value of having that consistent, competent, driver that were coming and picking up their food, that they would want to keep the program sustainable, not necessarily contribute everything that it would need to cost, that it costs to do that work, but they would see the value kind of, like they pay for other services. I was wrong, and that's not the case. So, that's been, I think, one of the challenging things is, so after, 4 years of running this program, now we've had to make the choice of, because it costs us $25,000 a month, and we don't have any consistent donations coming in from any of these businesses that are getting multiple $1 million benefits from it. So, we had to make the tough choice and just ask some of our partners that were getting food to say, would you be willing to contribute a little bit of money? And so we have some completely volunteer run community refrigerators that are contributing more money than other places. So, I think that's been one of the difficult things, is having to make that choice of, are we going to keep, because if we end that program, the food's just going to go back into the garbage where it was before. But, the thousands of people who've been depending on it for years are going to lose it. So, those are the kinds of decisions that I don't take lightly. And so, we did transition. We're using new software that's hopefully going to allow us to incorporate more volunteers, because there's definitely people out there who want to help and they want to be able to volunteer. It's just that, asking someone to volunteer 5 days a week, 7 days a week at 7 a.m. to pick up groceries from a grocery store when we have like 150 in our area, that's not possible. So I'm hopeful that, by making this investment in technology, that we'll be able to keep moving forward and having this food move, while also being able to really spend our resources more thoughtfully on those donations that don't fit into someone's truck or someone's vehicle. So convenience store donations, anyone could pick those up in their vehicle. A donation from like a wholesaler like Cisco, that's a little more difficult. So, I'm hoping that as we incorporate some of these, or incorporate technology, and I think also are just more open and honest about, what we're doing, where we're at, and where we're struggling, that, some other smart people in our community, or those who, want to see this work continue, will help us figure out how we can keep that going.
Wonderful. What do any of our other panelists have anything to add on this topic? All right. Well, I don't see any hands raised. So at this point, then I'm going to go around, and if each of the panelists could maybe highlight the secret to their success, maybe a top tip or a proudest moment, and your final thoughts or advice that you'd like to share with those tuning in today. So let's start with Mary.
That's a tough one. I think that, the legacy, of what we've been able to accomplish, that thousands and thousands of kids who've gone through the program and the chefs who've benefited is amazing. But at this point, I feel like one of the things that I'm most proud of is creating an organization that provides an incredible opportunity for our staff. And I think there's a bit of a shift happening in the nonprofit industry. I'd love to hear what, the other panelists have to say about that. But, for many years, the kind of standard in nonprofits was like, you should be grateful to do this work because you're doing the good work. Like we can't afford to pay you very much because we're a nonprofit. And we've made huge efforts in the last, I would say, 10 years to shift that mentality. And we set the goal of making Growing Chefs the best place to work in the world. That, that may or may not be what we accomplish, but that's what we try to do every day. And so we've been trying to adopt employment standards that make it a joyful place to be. And I'm so proud of what we've done, what we've accomplished there. And so I guess that would be my tip, to just keep striving, keep innovating, keep looking at ways that you can change not just the work you do, but the, the environment you create, and have fun and bring that joy both to, your staff, your volunteers, your constituents, and the people that you reach. It should be, nonprofit work is serious work, but it also should be fun.
Thank you so much. I love it. It should be fun. It should be a joy, even though it's hard work. So thank you very much for being here with us tonight. And Shanita, your final thoughts.
I think the one thing that I'm the most proud of is that our ability to work with other nonprofits, even when they don't want to work with us. When you're dealing with funding and funders and everybody's all like, oh, but who's going to get the funding? And so we try to approach it as what's good for the community is good for the nonprofit. And I'm not going to get caught up in who gets the funding, as long as we're doing the work. And then the second part is that we really work hard on engaging the end user and making sure that what we're putting out is something that they actually want to receive and not what I think they want. So those are kind of like the two things, is that you've got to work, you know, a lot of this work is very siloed, and you get much farther when you learn how to work together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so very, very much. All right, so let's go to Aubrey for your final thoughts.
I think kind of the key to all of this work is relationships. And, you know, that's really the only way I've been able to do this work. You know, when we were a team of one full-time and one part-time person, even now as a team of 3, you know, there's no way we could do any of this work if we didn't have good relationships with, you know, everyone that we're working with, and trying to, you know, start there and see what's possible. I think, you know, that's really where I've gotten most of my joy, is being able to empower and see the amazing things that, you know, incredible women are doing in our community. If, you know, because of my privilege of getting to have access to this food, I'm able to pass it along and see incredible things happen, and, you know, really hear about just the incredible work that everyone is doing. So that's been, you know, I think if we have 225 different partners that we are, you know, that we serve on a regular basis, I know every single one of them. And if, you know, we talk regularly, we want to have, you know, kind of to Mary's point, I want where I work to be joyful, because we're doing hard things. So if I'm not doing it with people that I like to be around, then that's not, you know, it's going to be a whole lot harder. That's what made today harder. So, you know, that's, I think, having good relationships and really using that to move the work forward. Because every time I've been stuck, I've been able to go to my, you know, tribe of women and say, what do I do now? And they've always been able to really guide and provide really thoughtful ideas and connections and resources. So I think, you know, that's how I've got here, and that's how I'll kind of continue in this work.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Anne, your final thoughts.
Oh, I think that that one of my happiest, probably even maybe the happiest place for me, is in a farmer's market. And so whenever things weren't going particularly well in the office, or we had a problem and so forth, I could always go to the farmer's market and feel better, and then, you know, get some inspiration. And the fact that a farmer in the United States is, in particular the small farmers, are really marginalized, and many of them have to have second jobs, and to provide a retail environment and a wholesale environment where they can thrive. But I'll just tell you, my most amazing experience was 2 weeks ago. So remember that street in Washington, D.C., the 20th Street that we didn't have a permit for? Well, the market, the DuPont market, just got a permit to close Massachusetts Avenue. Now, anybody that doesn't know Washington, that's one of the major avenues in Washington, D.C. Full Sunday mornings, from the setup to the breakdown of the market, we close 1 block of Massachusetts Avenue. So that there is an amazing result of 25 years of work.
Congratulations. That's certainly a cause for celebration.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, wow. I mean, I know that I have, and I know everyone tuning in as well has just loved hearing more from each of you about your heartful and joyful service. It's just been such an honor to get to know more about you and all that you do in your communities. So thank you all so much for your amazing work and your efforts. I know you're affecting so many lives across the country and internationally as well. You're just incredible role models, and I'm very much in awe of all of the work that's happening, and wish you all continued success in all of your efforts. So a huge virtual round of applause as we thank Anne, Shanita, Mary, and Aubrey. We appreciate you taking the time this evening to share your insights and your enthusiasm with the LDEI community today. And thank you to Greg and to Bev for allowing me to spend this time with all of you. And of course, thank you to Yeti and to La Crusade for their support. If you have not already, I urge you to go and check out the new LDEI website and check out the philanthropic efforts of the 21 featured nominees for the Woman of Purpose. This is a great opportunity to get involved with the Leadership and Mentorship Network Group, which is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you all in October for the 2022 Les Dames des Cafés International Annual Conference in New York City. Thank you all and have a great evening.
Thank you.